In 2023, I read 100 books as part of my Goodreads challenge. Yes, 100 books, mostly all actual books. A couple of them were like shorter plays or things, just to bump the numbers a little bit. But I read 100 books. I wanted to share with you my recommendations, the things that I thought were the absolute best, that I thought were really exciting. I tried to think of some way to sort this, and they're all very, very different from each other. Very hard to pick. I actually read mostly things that I enjoyed this year, which is always a good thing. So it's pretty much an order of like what you're most likely to have already heard of, or like what doesn't really need me talking it up, to stuff that's a little bit more obscure. So if you're here for the weird shit, skip towards the end. Let us begin. Best book. Probably best book of all time, TBH. Not to overhype, this specific section, but I got through book 3 of Marcel Proust's In Search of Lost Time. I read The Guermantes Way. Yeah, I know, I'm a snob, but it's really good. If you like, at all, 19th century lit at all, like, or if you're just like, you're a big Paris fan and you can read stuff that's kind of dense, you're gonna love this. Absolutely. Like, and also Proust is just so beautiful. He can encapsulate human experience in like sunshine coming through a hotel window. Like, it's absolutely incredible. If you're not a big reader, I don't recommend starting with it because it is really dense. He can literally have a sentence that goes on for like 3 pages. And it's just because, you used to be able to write like that with nested things, with complicated sentence structures, but we don't do that as much anymore. So if you're interested in reading it, of course, I also recommend starting with the first book, which is Swann's Way. I read that I think a couple years ago now, but making my way through the whole series and I love it. It's just really spectacular. Next is I finally got around to reading The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. Maybe some of you have definitely like read that already. It's a classic of childhood that I just never got around to. But my partner runs a book club and he and some of our friends selected this one because it's a classic that a lot of us had not read. And it was beautiful. It's very much like if you want some cozy vibes, but also occasionally some like departures into hilarious violence or like pagan worship. There's like a lot of stuff going on in there. Like, it's more complicated than I think we generally give children's lit credit for. And because the guy made these stories to try to desperately entertain his own children when they were falling asleep, and they ended up really falling in love with the characters. And so some of it, like, things happen kind of out of left field, but it's all very beautiful. Very much recommend if you need a read that's like a little bit more let's snuggle up and read about a badger and his friends. On the other end of that, a not snuggle up read that I do really recommend, though, is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. You've probably seen this one blowing up on Goodreads and stuff. The audiobook is really great. Again, Jennette McCurdy, like I said, you probably already heard about this, but she's a former child star. She was in that show. Wow, I'm such a hipster. I am not recalling the name of the show, but it's one of those, it's like iCarly. Oh my God. She was on iCarly. She was like one of the main kind of sidekicks for the main character on iCarly. She just went through it. Not only was she totally exploited as a child actress, but the book is also a very insightful, honest, and hard to listen to exploration of growing up with a narcissist parent. Narcissist, to say the least. I think that if you are coming from a similar place of an abusive past, an abusive childhood, it can be very healing to listen to somebody else's story, because you kind of start to realize like, oh no, nobody should act to a person like that. That's unacceptable. And then you're like, oh, they shouldn't have acted to me like that. If you were lucky enough to not be abused as a child, good for you. I'm happy for you. I hope there are a lot of you out there. It's a good thing to get an insight into, and also just how fucked up the movie industry is. Like, child labor is supposed to be pretty much illegal. Why do we let them do it for movies? Why do we let that happen? I came out of reading that book like, we need to ban child acting. Like, there's no real reason why kids need to be at least like full-time child actors. There's no reason. We don't desperately need the talents of 8-year-olds so badly for art's sake that we can justify stealing their childhood. Hot take that I got from this book, so you should check it out yourself. The next one that I want to recommend, and I try to keep this video a little bit short. I'm only gonna do 8. Of course, I always have more book recommendations. If there's a particular genre or something that you really like, or a genre you want to explore but you're not sure where to start, pop your request into the comments and I'll help you find your next book. Because I love making book recommendations and I'm very good at book I'm not very good at talking, but I'm very good at book matchmaking. Ta-da! The next one I would like to recommend is a collection of horror stories. Horror stories called The Wide Carnivorous Sky by John Langan. I realized this year, and maybe like started to realize the year before, I really like horror. I didn't know that I did. I guess like I don't really like thrillers. I was like, I don't need more anxiety in my life. Like I'm already an anxious mess. But there's something about horror, the fact that it's like inescapable, that both spooks me and is kind of soothing. I feel like with this blue hoodie, I'm just like hands. So, there's something kind of soothing about the existential dread and like inescapable despair of horror. So if you also like horror books, John Langan is like, he's been writing a long time. So I'm not going to by any means be like, let me introduce you to this obscure author, because he's been writing a long time and is fairly well known in the genre. He's in bookstores, etc. But if you have not heard of him, or maybe you've only seen like his longer novel, he wrote The Fisherman, which is also really good, but maybe you haven't checked out his short fiction, The Wide Carnivorous Sky, really good. The images from that book haunt me, and like I want them to invade my writing in the future. Like I want to be like, I would felt inspired by these stories and also really spooked. like oh shit, the sky is creepy now, like level spooked. Like he made the sky scary, so like clear blue sky now is a little bit scary. So it's cool to see that, because I had never really been that spooked by horror books before, but he does a really great job. And I guess I didn't read that widely in the genre before like last year and this year, and I really enjoy them, and he's one of my favorites. So check it out if you like horror at all. Second to last thing is a very silly selection from the guys who started McSweeney's Quarterly, which is I think it's quarterly, but McSweeney's, they do a magazine that's like every single time they print it, it looks a little different, and it's full of satire and wonderful silly goodness. Very silly guys. They came up with these characters called Dr. Doris Haggis on Way and Mr. Haggis on Way, who is Benny. I love Benny. And they're writing this like really ridiculous science series. The book that I read is called Cold Fusion, and I think it's the 4th in the series. Cold Fusion is basically like, it was the idea that you could make nuclear fusion at room temperature just by like throwing the right chemicals together in a tub. And it was really promising for like 20 years, like 70s to 80s or something like that. And like a lot of people were really into it, thought it was totally gonna be a thing. And now it's generally considered like, it's not a thing. like scientists are like, you know, anything's possible, but this probably not. Like they're like, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, so I don't think it's gonna happen. So it's a whole book about how great cold fusion is. How it's definitely better than any other type of fusion or fission. It's very quick, it's very silly. It's basically a sarcastic picture book written in these characters of Dr. Doris and her husband Benny. Benny gets to live in his shed so he doesn't distract Dr. Doris. I relate to Benny more than I expected to or really want to. Benny's a simple man, and I appreciated him. So that's a very silly book. It's on Goodreads, so you should be able to find it online. Like, it's not an old book. And there's more in the series. There's one called like The Absolutely Disgusting Things in Your Head or something. And like one that's just like giraffes. Like it's just about how giraffes came here from space because they're too ridiculous. Stuff just like occurred. Very funny. Highly recommend. My last big recommendation. This is one of my absolute favorites that I read this year. It's called Vermis by Plastiboo. That's Plastiboo. Plastiboo. Vermis is done like an old school game guide. It's like for a dungeon crawler called Vermis, but it's like a work of art, and it like takes you through the game, but the game doesn't actually exist. But you feel like it does as you're reading it because the guide is so interesting and the designs are so cool and it's very atmospheric and kind of dark. You know, it's a lot of existential dread. There's some creepy stuff in there, man, but it's very cool. And like I said, it's also very, like, it's got this nostalgic vibe because it's going back to when, like, you couldn't just Google, like, how to win GTA San Andreas. You had to, like, send money to get a game guide. It's kind of a throwback to that, into the artwork that would sometimes go into these game guides. In this case, the artwork is incredible. There is a sense of, like, narrative, like you're going somewhere, but the narrative is not the primary thing. Vibes are the primary thing, and the vibes are immaculately spooky. So a lot of spooky this year. There's one I left off because I said I was going to do 8, and there is one more that I want to talk about, so special surprise one at the end here. This is actually one that you may have already heard of or seen. It's definitely like been kind of front and center in bookstores, but I really want to recommend it. It's called The Collected Schizophrenias by Esme Weijun Wang. Wayne is schizophrenic. She has a certain type of schizophrenia. She's also a successful writer and successful, etc. And like, you know, for a while was like a model student. And so like schizophrenia and gifted and talented child syndrome. It was so interesting. She does this really great job of kind of reporting her own experience, but going back and forth between that and like more cultural commentary without ever really feeling like she's being preachy. She like recognizes that a lot of these things are complicated, such as, you know, something you would think that she would be preachy about, such as like, how do we care for people in society who have schizophrenia? But then she like breaks that open and is like, okay, what does that mean? Like, do people with schizophrenia have agency to decide their own care? When should they have agency to decide their own? Like, she just breaks these things up into like so many nuances and brings in so many different opinions while also humanizing it always with her own person, which I think is really incredible and brave. It's just really well written, and it was also very cool because I realized that I had a lot of ideas about schizophrenia going into it that like were wrong. I mean, of course, but also like I just learned so much about schizophrenia in particular, and also realized that like schizophrenia and anxiety are, to me now, kind of feel like they're on a spectrum. Like untreated anxiety can trigger or become this thing, you know, and there's a lot of complications there, but I just really started thinking about these things in terms that like I had not before. It really helped me to see that there are a lot of similarities actually between like extreme anxiety attacks and schizophrenic episodes, and that was really interesting to me to see kind of the schizophrenia is not like its own scary thing out here. It's got a lot of similarities and a lot of connections and a lot of convergence and concurrence with a lot of these other mental illnesses. Super interesting. So I highly recommend that. There it is. Those are my recommendations for 2023. Those were the books that I thought were the best. I mean, and you know, this was really hard to pick because I read a lot of good stuff. So if none of these sound interesting to you, fuck it. Tell me what type of book you like and I'll give you like 5 other ones. I just thought that these were the ones that I really wanted to share with y'all because I think they had a big impact on me, and some of them were surprising, or some of them were maybe ones that I think not enough people have heard of or not enough people are talking about. And they were all very well written, and I really felt like I learned something. What was your favorite book of 2023? What did you enjoy the most? What do you think was the best book that you read? Let me know in the comments. Maybe I'll add it to my extremely massive Goodreads TBR. Maybe it's already on there, because there are 3,000 books on my Goodreads TBR. I have a problem, help me. If you're interested in adding another book to your Goodreads TBR, please consider one of mine. I am an author. I write books. That was a whistle. I write books. I like to combine my wit and a sense of warmth to make characters you'd really like to be friends with in places you would really like to be, or at least visit in the case of The Citadel, which is a dangerous dystopian nightmare. Check out my books on Amazon. Link is in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe. Next video, I will be doing my 10, I don't know, we'll see. Again, I talk too long to do 10 things. And also, a part of the video is just gonna be me complaining about Henry James. So if you wanna see that, and what I think were the worst books that I read in 2023, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on that video. Thank you so much. Have a lovely rest of your day. And go read a book. Tell me books you like. Put them in the comments. Yay, boo.